nightmare. I kept sitting there saying, you know, maybe I just don't get this guy. Kendall Lamar, and he won all these Grammys.
It was so bad, Jimmy Carter came back to life just to turn off the TV.
Bro, I couldn't understand a word that was being said.
It was hard to make out what...
Hip-hop has done more damage to black and brown people than racism in the last 10 years.
What's up, YouTube? It's Keon, aka Keon, puts you on in today. We're talking about how hip-hop can't be mainstream. Now, as always, if you like the content, make sure you like and subscribe, and comment down below what you think. But let's get into it. After the Kendrick Super Bowl, there was a lot of outrage, right? And I'm sure we all saw it. Fox News went on a whole tirade, bro, like, talking about the Super Bowl. A lot of right-wing media talked about the Super Bowl, and it was defended heavily by a lot of people as well. So I don't want to, not put shine on that. However, given the response of the Super Bowl, I kind of realized that we're not at a place where hip-hop is going to be accepted by the masses within America. And I really thought that we were closer than we were. I really didn't expect Kendrick's Super Bowl performance to be as quote-unquote outrageous as people made it seem. And I know Twitter and YouTube and all these different things want to dramatize something that shouldn't be taking this out of proportion. It was taken crazy, to crazy places. And I really thought, personally, we were at a different place. Okay, I thought hip-hop was, kind of more accepted. A lot of people would be saying hip-hop is quote-unquote dead, but then, hip-hop has some of the best years it's ever had, or, people drop, it's, has some of the most streams. Even this year, Kendrick with GNX broke some crazy records. I mean, he was, one of the most streamed albums of this year so far. The Rap Beef in last year had some crazy numbers on it as well. And so I just didn't expect the Super Bowl be taken so out of proportion. And it started to make me realize, why is that? And why is some hip-hop looked down upon and other areas of hip-hop isn't? And I was really thinking, and what I came to the conclusion is that the closer you get to the principle of hip-hop, the less mainstream it will be. Okay? So if you are a perfect principled version of hip-hop, and we'll get into the principles of it, if you're at the perfect principled version of hip-hop, you can't be mainstream. Now, the further you deviate from these principles, the more potential or the more opportunity you have to be mainstream. You'll just have a higher opportunity to be mainstream. And what I mean by the principles of hip-hop, kind of what I roughly think the principles of hip-hop are, and these are kind of an ebb and flow, kind of ever-changing for me. The first principle, I think you have to be kind of anti-establishment or anti-government / anti-police, right? I think it's one of the foundational principles of hip-hop. I think we see that with you see that in very early renditions of hip-hop, kind of where it's coming out. You see that with Tupac. And there's even some older rappers like NWA, about Diggable Planet, for example. And Diggable Planet kind of leads us into the second thing, which I think is you have to be conscious. Conscious of things around you, conscious of people around you, conscious of the things going on around you. I think a good example of this is a Nas.
Imagine smoking in the street without cops harassing. Imagine going to court with no trial.
Talking about where he grew up and the things that were happening around him as a child that was irregular, not normal, and kind of how he had to deal with that and how people around him were dealing with that. I think we see this with the miseducation of Lauryn Hill, very conscious of growing up kind of within this system, not necessarily understanding everything that was happening, and kind of getting to a place where she feels more comfortable. And we see that even with a Tupac, very, very conscious. Now, I think the third thing, and I think this is very, very important and kind of links to everything else. I think all three of these link to each other. But the third and final principle of hip-hop that I believe exists is you have to be talking about oppression in some sort of way. Whether that is oppression based on race, class, ethnicity. I think one of the foundational pillars in what we see very early on in hip-hop, and similar to all the rappers that I mentioned previously, is that they all talk about oppression in some way. Whether that is systemic, whether that is Tupac talking about ghetto gospel, talking about people in the hood trying to make it through and they're good people, but they're just in bad situations. I think even Tyler, the Creator, kind of talks about this in a song like 48. 48, 48, 48 states, I get it in. Where he's talking about people being forced to be crack dealers. There's different things like this where we see the roots of hip-hop ebb and flow come through hip-hop and every artist that you see kind of up and coming. And there's a few exceptions, and we'll get into those exceptions and why they made it very mainstream. But those are my 3 principles. Now, I think not every rapper has all 3. I think most rappers don't. I think it's rare for a rapper that we all know to have all 3. And I think definitely, especially in this era of social media, of like very fast content, of everything being right in your face, it's rare that you'll sit down, or that a lot of people will sit down and hear some lyrical miracle type of conscious rapper talking about something as serious as like oppression. It's like the Outkast song says, like, you don't want to hear me, you just want to dance. It's kind of like that vibe. And so I think it's hard for a lot of people to sit down and do that. Even myself, I'm like, there are some good Dave E songs, but he's too lyrical for me, bro. He be doing too much. There's like good Billy Wood songs, but he is really, really deep. And sometimes I don't know what he's talking about. You know what I'm saying? Like sometimes he's like too deep. He's using terms I've never heard. So I think it's very hard for a rapper to have all 3. Because of this fact, a lot of rappers move away from that. They move away from a couple of these things. And you'll see this early on within rappers like Run DMC, MC Hammer, like Rapper's Delight, where they actually move away from almost all 3 of these principles. And the only things that remain within kind of the hip-hop sphere is the beat selection, like the beat pads, that they're rapping on the track. And they're missing these like 3 foundational principles, which is where MC Hammer got a lot of his criticism and hate from, is because he was so commercialized. Similar to like a Drake, that people almost didn't classify him as hip-hop. People came at MC Hammer. I think he got too much hate. He like put hip-hop in front of a lot of people. However, similar to Rapper's Delight, which had a lot of controversy in its own right. It was accused of stealing verses, kind of being a cornier, washed down version of hip-hop in terms of like where hip-hop was at and what the world got its first glimpse of hip-hop being. These are artists, these are songs that fully went away from the 3 main principles of rap. Again, I'm not saying this is necessarily a terrible thing. I think making a mainstream song, okay, cool, like at least you're getting hip-hop in front of people to an extent, but it's created kind of this culture and this kind of history that the mainstream rap songs, the rap songs that people are first introduced to, are going to be the ones straying from talking about oppression, talking about real issues within communities, talking about like anti-establishment type of rhetoric. And that's where we're left with like a Drake, or we're left with like a Jack Harlow, or even like up and coming recently like Ian. These are rappers who do not talk about these things. They lose a lot of credibility and validity within the craft from their contemporaries, from critics. Ian especially has gotten a lot of kickback. Drake lost his whole rap battle basically on the premise that Drake wasn't for the culture. A lot of these rappers that move away from the values of hip-hop, and you can see the effect of it. It may not be within the mainstream. Drake is still touring in Australia. Ian just went on Lyrical Lemonade. Jack Harlow still gets millions and millions of views no matter what song he drops. So it's not like these values are hindering them financially. However, it does show that they have a lack of consideration for the principles or the culture that built up hip-hop. Now, if you want to make booty-shaking music every once in a while, I'm cool with that. If you want to make some club music, I'm okay with that, me personally. Again, I want to bring up Outkast. They had some bangers, bro. They had some club bangers. They had some speaker knockers, but did they stray away from talking about oppression within their music? No. Did they stray away from talking about like real issues within their music? No, especially in their earlier albums. They did not do that. Similar to like Kendrick's an outlier, but Kendrick, again, talks about real topics. However, he still got bangers. He's an outlier for sure, though. Like, these are outliers within mainstream rap. You even see this with Eminem, for example. I think a large reason why he was so revered, so pioneered, is that he kind of made just fun, whatever music. And he had his, like, slow love songs. He had his music talking about trauma, so he's not the face of this. But however, I think he gets a lot of mainstream credibility because, one, he is a white rapper. He's easy to relate to if you're a white person. Like, you see someone you would instantly identify with. Whereas if it's someone black and you're white or maybe you're a different race, there's a barrier of entry almost because you have to be conscious of, like, the black experience or what, like, is happening within the country. However, with Eminem, you don't necessarily have to do that. So there's a level of, like, one of these principles almost being removed by the listener. So it's not necessarily an Eminem fault, but the listener kind of takes away this conscious thought because you no longer have to think about things as deeply. Again, not Eminem's fault. I don't think Eminem is the face of this issue. Like, I think Drake is more responsible for pioneering this culture more than anybody in the past, 10 years. I think what I want to highlight is that this doesn't necessarily happen with other genres. I think in other genres, I feel like there's no need to move further away from your genre. I think country artists rarely have to really move away from the roots of their music. I mean, if we look at a Morgan Wallen, he does have aspects of pop aesthetically within his music, but in terms of subject matter and tone, he's still country. He's very, very country. He hasn't strayed from his country roots. He doesn't have to. Taylor Swift, again, a Nashville artist, moved to pop, does not have to stray away from talking about certain topics or bringing up a certain subject matter within her music, her genre. So she can stay within her genre and be fine. Rock music, again, doesn't have this issue, even though a lot of rock is anti-establishment because of the tone, because usually a lot of people that we see mainstream are white. If they are talking about anti-establishment, a lot of people don't realize it. There's a lot of criticism, with Green Day. I've seen a lot of people criticize Green Day for being anti-establishment, and they have an entire album an entire song, song or album, called American Idiot. They're criticizing America the entire time. I see a lot of people talking about, Green Day got woke, or they said, F Trump at some points. They were like, Green Day got woke. They've never been for the government. That has never been their vibe. I think a lot of it has to do with race. I think rock is a good example. I think other genres are a good example. And I think a large part of it is the barrier of entry. It's just, one, you have to be thinking critically about races that you're not. Similar, there has been rappers in other countries, the UK, and there's Mexican rappers that also talk about oppression and things like that within their own communities, but within these cultures, I don't think it's as hindered. I don't think hip-hop is as hindered as it is within America itself. And I think it's looked down upon. In terms of if you're trying to get conscious, if you're trying to be anti-government, they not rocking with you. They not rocking with us. It's just not gonna happen. You know what I'm saying? And I just think you don't see this in other genres. And it's so interesting to me that this is a hip-hop specific thing. At least it seems like. If you disagree, please let me know. But it definitely seems like a hip-hop specific issue. And I don't see it changing. I really thought it did a little bit. Until Kendrick's Super Bowl performance, where he had messages of Uncle Sam. He had messages of black people being dressed in the flag and doing all these different poses, kind of representing that the nation is divided, things like that. So, he was sending a message, but none of it was hateful. None of it was any crazy critiques on the establishment that we haven't already heard. And yet it was viewed so poorly within kind of this right-wing sphere, mainly white sphere. And it's just so interesting to me. People being I can't even understand what he's saying. Things of that nature. Kind of having these little microaggressions. Low-key macroaggressions. I don't even know if it's micro at this point, but macroaggressions. And we've seen these before. We've seen these 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. It's really sad to me. I really thought we was a little bit further. I didn't think we was that much further, but one step further. And so I'm hoping that this kind of attitude changes. It's good to see someone like a Doechii kind of get her flowers. Because I think she could be a pioneer of this within this new generation of artists. G.I.D., I can't see him going mainstream because he hits all three of these principles, I think, kind of on the head. And I really can't imagine he'd go super duper mainstream. I think there would have been a chance had his last album got a Grammy nomination, but it didn't. Despite being, I think, the best album that year. I think that was 2023. I think maybe 2022. But Forever Story, I think, was one of the best albums that year. And it didn't even get an acknowledgement within the Grammys. Not even a nomination. And we've seen rappers kind of break this mold. Like a J. Cole. Like a Kendrick. However, I do think these are outliers. And I think more often than not, we will get artists who deviate from these three principles. For sure. I just think it's natural. And I think we're seeing it happening. I think even with a Playboy Cardi, Ken Carson, they don't talk about anything conscious within their lives and hip-hop that I've heard. Maybe they do, But it's more so like they're talking about love, heartbreak, getting money, X, Y, and Z, kind of the surface level things that we as a society expect from rap. However, I think it is a bad representation of most of what rap is. Like, I don't think JPEG Mafia can ever go mainstream due to this fact. I just don't think the powers that be will let him, and I don't think most people will listen to him enough to empathize and realize kind of the message that he's sending, along with his music just not being for the club or something like that. Like, he's not making mainstream sound. That's kind of my consensus for the video. I don't think hip-hop can really be truly mainstream. But what do you guys think down below? Please let me know down in the comments. As always, I appreciate you guys and love you guys. Check out my other videos. They should be on the side right here or in the description as well. And I appreciate you guys for checking out my last video talking about Timothée Chalamet can't be passionate, ? It's almost at 1,000 views or 900 views. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. I appreciate y'all, man. And yeah, check out my Instagram, TikTok, Twitch. I'll be streaming today or tomorrow, whenever you see this. I'll be streaming sometime during this week. Whatever you're seeing this, I'm trying to stream more consistently, so I'm going to get back on that. And that way I can upload more to my gaming channel, which is in the description down below, which also has musical reactions. So it's also on there too. A lot of content coming out. But as always, I love you guys and appreciate you guys. Peace out. Be smooth.